Alexis is from Seedcoin, which is a incubation company in the Bitcoin space. And then James is from Ripple Singapore. And the old joke is just when you think you understand Bitcoin, start asking about Ripple. So yeah, why don't I have you guys introduce yourselves first, and we'll start with Alexis.
Well, hi, good morning or good afternoon. Well, as David introduced, my name is Alexis, and I'm the Chief Funding Officer at Seedcoin. So, as it's a mouthful, Seedcoin, it's a Bitcoin startup virtual incubator. So basically, we incubate startups at a very seed stage, and we usually incubate startups that are Bitcoin-centric. So we incubate them, we invest in them, we raise Bitcoin, and we reinvest Bitcoin. So that's basically the founding model of our company.
And what's interesting about what you guys did is you actually raised funds on an over-the-counter platform.
That's
so
correct.
It's a great example of crowdfunding.
So basically, yes, the idea was, it's actually a bit more complex than that. So we basically bundle up a few startups, which it is basically, this is crowdsourcing actually. So we crowdsource a few projects, and then we list it in a security exchange, which can be accessed by basically everybody that owns Bitcoin. So they can purchase the stock or the share of this bundle of startups in this Bitcoin security exchange. So basically everybody can actually invest in those companies. And that was a very, very innovative way of, I would say, raise capital in the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Yeah, so I mean, the entire raise was in Bitcoin, and then you're giving out Bitcoin.
Absolutely, absolutely. And well, one of our inside joke is we always add up to say that we also pay our lawyers in Bitcoin. And that was one of the biggest challenges as well.
Okay, and James?
Hi, my name's James. I'm from the UK, and I'm here on behalf of Ripple Singapore, although I'm here to talk about Ripple in general. Ripple is a digital marketplace. So if Bitcoin is a math-based or cryptographic-based currency, it's fantastic. Ripple is a math and cryptographic-based marketplace. I'm hoping to be able to demonstrate what that is. Just out of interest, who's heard of Ripple? 3 people. Okay, I told you earlier.
Who's heard of Bitcoin prior to this? Just to get an idea.
Well, okay.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Well, so
how many people own Bitcoin? Just out of curiosity. That's actually a pretty good representation. Yeah, we got a new converter. Okay. Yeah, if anyone else would like a little bit after, let me know, and I'm happy to spread the word. Spread some Bitcoin out.
Sure. So Bitcoin seems to be really making some waves in Singapore now, thanks largely to these guys, and that's fantastic. And we're hoping to see Ripple take off in Singapore as well. And perhaps it would be best if I just show you what it does. Epi, is that possible? Epi, is it okay if I come up and? Okay. Okay. So perhaps some internet issues. Basically, Ripple is a payment mechanism and an exchange at the same time. So any item of value can be traded for any other item of value between any 2 users over the Ripple network. At the moment, it seems to be limited to just currencies. So fiat currencies that you're familiar with of US dollar or euro, etc., and also digital currencies, of which Bitcoin is easily the most popular on the Ripple network. Ripple Singapore has added gold and silver on top of those currencies. Some people say gold and silver are money, and some people say that's a commodity, and I don't mind what people say. So our users are now able to send and trade gold and silver all over the Ripple network. Why is this relevant to crowdsourcing? The reason it's relevant is because any item of value can be traded over the Ripple network. So that could be a currency, it could be a commodity, but it could also be shares in a company. So if you wanted to start a cafe and you needed $100,000 to get that started, you could sell those shares over the Ripple network, and then people could buy and sell those shares, hopefully that they might go up in value in the future, and they could be broken down into divisible parts. So I think that's the advantage of Ripple for crowdsource. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so what do you guys see as far as the future then for crowdfunding and your specific platforms, whether it be?
Okay, well, for us, what I think it's most important, as I mentioned before, it has to be Bitcoin-centric. So obviously, as for today, people, when they want to open a cafe or fund any personal project, they usually look at raising actual cash, which, well, it's okay with us, but you will have to convert the Bitcoins that we're going to give you back into cash. But I will see already, and basically we receive about 20 applications a week of new startups coming up and wanting to deal with Bitcoins. So I wasn't really much into crowdfunding or crowdsourcing prior to that, but I caught up quite quickly. And from what I see there's a lot of people that are really coming into the space. And obviously, since there's a lot of people that have a lot of Bitcoins out there that they want to make them fructify, we'll see more people asking for Bitcoin and wanting to be crowdfunded in Bitcoin as well. So for us, it's very good, obviously, because we also incubate our own personal startups. For instance, we have this crowdfunding startup based for athletes. So it's called Bit Sponsored, basically. And we will allow the crowd that owns Bitcoin to be able to sponsor at a very seed stage any athlete. So we have everything. We have future Formula One drivers. We have future football players, future basketball stars, and stuff like that. So we are already seeing some people that are very willing to spend the Bitcoin into these athletes. So for us, yes, we will definitely see a future in this. And as long as Bitcoin catches up, and as long as the acceptance of Bitcoin is out there, then yes, there will be a future for crowdfunding in Bitcoin. Yes, absolutely.
Cool. And with Ripple, what do you say?
I guess one of the advantages of Ripple is that everybody gets to choose the currency of their choice, and many merchants simply just want their own domestic currency. So if someone lives in Malaysia, they need ringgit, and if they live in Japan, they need yen. However, Bitcoin obviously has got a huge role to play in this space, because I think there's just going to be so much innovation and new startups, and I'm sure that Alexis company is going to help many of them come to fruition. And as Bitcoin grows, there's going to be a much greater demand for Bitcoin, because people will be able to spend it. And that will be reflected, and is being reflected, on the Ripple network as we speak. However, in terms of crowdsourcing, almost inevitably, most companies are going to require their domestic currency. And if they're an international company, maybe an IT company perhaps, or software programming, then they may well want USD. And that's fine, and it's understandable. And so they need to be able to raise the currency that they require, and Ripple will allow people to be able to sell the shares that they need. Maybe they only need to sell 20% of 1,000 shares, so just 200 shares on the Ripple network, and those could be bought instantaneously and traded for the currency that they require. Let's say somebody lives in Brazil and they need real, then that's fine too. The most important thing, so far as I understand, is if you're investing in a startup company, you're kind of hoping that this goes up in value. Am I correct? That's the goal. Okay. If it goes up in value and the company is successful, that's fantastic. You now need some way to realize that profit. You need to be able to cash out somehow. Okay. At the moment, that's not so easy. If it really hits the big time, if it works out to be the next Facebook, for example, sure, it goes IPO, and then you can sell those shares on a listed stock exchange. And And that's a huge success story, and I look forward to many of these Bitcoin companies doing exactly that in the future. But most companies don't get to go IPO, but they are still successful. How is it then that if you've backed one of these companies, you bought into it, you turn out to be right, it turned out to be successful, it's gone up 5 times in value, you want to be able to sell it, and you want to be able to sell it for the currency that you need. Ripple allows that, so I'm hoping that that's going to be helpful. Rather soon, a very helpful development is the contracts. I believe there's Bitcoin equivalents coming soon as well, in which there'll be contracts available in Ripple, and you'll be able to pay dividends. So let's say you opened your cafe, you received the $100,000 that you need from your investors, and you would now like to be able to start paying them 5% every year. That's possible. That will be possible over the Ripple network. And so whoever has bought those shares, it might not be the original person, is now able to start receiving those dividends on a monthly or yearly basis, or however it's been programmed. The challenge, however, is who issues these shares in the first place, and maybe that's something we can talk about in a bit.
So the question is for Ripple. If you buy a share or issue a share through Ripple, in which currency will be the share denominated?
Sure, so that's a great question. Almost certainly, the people selling these shares are going to want the currency of the country that they've registered their business in. So Malaysia, they'll almost certainly want ringgit, for example. If they're a Bitcoin company, then they may well want Bitcoin. So it would be up to the merchants to decide which currency in which they could sell their shares for.
Can you share your thoughts on Bitcoin with regards to drugs and hot money?
Yeah, I think you want to answer?
Well, we can actually both answer.
We're probably the same opinion, so.
Well, the reason why I have an opinion, it's well, very simple. If you give me money, Singapore dollars, I can guarantee you I can buy some drugs with it. As much as I can take these Singapore dollars that you give me and make them disappear from the IRS. Same was with the US dollars. US dollars, since the dawn of US dollars, people bought drugs with it. And since the dawn of US dollar, people made scams and screen companies and evade tax. So again, Bitcoin is really at its infancy. So there are going to be malicious people out there that will eventually try to do this. But we also act as regulators in a sense. For example, we do our KYC as well. And we do due diligence as well on the companies and the startups that we incubate. Okay, of course, we cannot really go too deep into asking, I don't know, the legal file of this person that's seeking incubation, but we're definitely looking into what kind of trade they're going to be involved with.
Yeah, I would say with any new technology, whether it be a currency technology or an electronic technology like the VCR, you have people in the early days using it for illegal purposes, and you have a lot of headlines in the news about that. But as it grows, and certainly with Bitcoin in the early days, it was used for drug purchases without a doubt. But as it grows and as it gains acceptance, that becomes a smaller and smaller part of it. If you look at any new technology, whether it be the telephone or again the VCR or the motion picture, it was used by more nefarious people. But you know, today it's eclipsed any of that, all those technologies. So it's a little bit of an issue, but it's more for the media to make something of than reality. As Alexis said, you know, we want to make sure that we're doing things properly. When I broker for somebody, it's all through the iBanking system, so it's completely, you know, you can find out who did the transactions very easily. And all the exchanges that I know of all do KYC at this point, even though it might not necessarily be regulatory pressure for them to do it, but they still do it just because it's the right thing to do. So I think, you know, those of us in the industry are already doing a lot of these things that people want done. So I don't see it as much of an issue. And I actually haven't heard of an actual prosecution as far as Bitcoin. I've heard of arrests, but I haven't heard of convictions for money laundering or anything like that yet. But you know, every day in the paper you read about money laundering for banks, and in reality, it's a lot easier to pay off a banker to launder money than it is to do a transaction in Bitcoin, because it's such a small market.
And it would be actually so difficult as well to do.
It would be difficult. There's just not enough volume at this point to make it worthwhile to somebody.
One additional point, Ripple and Bitcoin both have blockchains on which every single transaction is recorded thousands, millions of times forever. So if somebody does manage to link your name to a certain address, well, then they can now see every single transaction that you've made. So I would argue that Bitcoin and Ripple and other such blockchain-proofed marketplaces or currencies are probably the very worst choice you could possibly make if you want to start dealing in drugs or doing illegal things. Just on the subject of Ripple, I believe that Epi has had some success with...
Yeah, I set you up.
You've got...
Yeah, so
okay.
tell me which...
Guys, would it be okay if I just show you what Ripple does very quickly? Otherwise, we will walk away not knowing. Okay, here we go. Okay. Another way to describe Ripple is a trust network. And that builds upon how the world really works. So when you... Who flew to Singapore recently? Okay. When you bought those tickets, presumably online, you simply trust that when you turn up at the airport, those tickets are going to convert into a flight, yeah? Okay, so lots of people get very nervous about this being a trust network thing, but if we don't trust each other, then the world will grind to a halt anyway. So Ripple builds on top of what we already know works. What you're looking at here is the trust lines to my gateway, Ripple Singapore. So all those, that's the little golden blob in the middle. All those trust lines and blobs coming in are people who believe that Ripple Singapore really does have the gold and silver it's claiming to do so. Okay, so I'll just give you a quick demonstration of what it can do so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. Here we have Alice. Alice is a made-up person. I haven't broken into anyone's wallet or anything. So Alice lives in America, and so she likes US dollars. That's her currency of choice. So she trusts a gateway in America that claims to have US dollars, and she's seen proof that they really do have the dollars that they claim they do. Okay. Here, however, is Bob, and Bob lives in Europe, so he likes euros, okay? However, Bob is a slightly unusual character. Bob likes gold, okay? He's a bit of a gold bug. Can I scroll sideways?
Yeah.
Okay. So XAU is the currency symbol for gold, and Bob holds some gold in his online wallet as well, okay? So you could hold many different items of value. Any item of value will be fine, okay? Bob owes Alice 1 US cent, okay? So Bob would simply... How do we do that? Yeah, that's it, great. We'd go to send, put in A for Alice. So there's Alice's address. He owes Alice 1 cent. I'm going to click USD and scroll down. Okay. So then, Bob doesn't actually own any USD. Okay? So this should be a problem. However, because the Ripple algorithm is constantly doing all the calculations every 5 seconds of all items of value being traded, he can now simply spend money from his gold account. Are we sure this is what he wants to do? Yes, it is. So it's calculated immediately what is the price of 1 cent in gold. He presses confirm, and then we really hope that this is working. The internet. Transaction is cleared, okay? So Bob has had that value deleted from his gold, and now we can see Alice has got 1 cent. Okay? And that's it. So on this occasion, we used the examples of one currency and one commodity, but it could also be a share in your new cafe. And that's what Ripple can do. Thank you.
Great. It's really interesting. You know, I knew this, I came this before, you talking about pennies in US dollar and being transferred here. There's like $6 billion worth of coins, like physical coins sitting in people's homes in the United States alone. What this is going to do, this is going to totally eliminate that. And it's in people's pockets that they can do something. Imagine if you just take this $6 billion and you give it to a country that really needs it. I mean, I'm not talking to government officials. I'm talking to people of the country that needs it, right? It would be really a big difference. So I think, you know, we're living in these times that pretty much there's a lot of things that's happening. It's coming to us. And there's this passive mode of this thinking that we're living in, that some of them are reacting, they're embracing, and they're moving very fast, and some of them are just like walking like a turtles. So I think it's really interesting to bring this up. The other point that I like to make is that, you know, we talk about Mt. Gox, you know, losing $500 million worth of Bitcoins. I mean, that's really an issue, and it's important to know that, you know, this is like a highly risked market still. I mean, it's still in a very infant stage of innovation. Think about back when the whole US dollar or any other currency came on and the counterfeits money that we had. But, you know, we never talk about how many billions of dollars are getting lost every single year from wired money from banks. I have a friend who lost $250,000 in 6 hours from his bank alone. And the bank will never return the money. And the reason why some hackers out of Ukraine went onto the system, they wired money $9,970 and transactions, like over 20 transactions. How many of those happens every single day today? A lot. So I think we're in this stage of innovation that we cannot just fight it. We have to start to embrace it because this is where the future is. And this is the reason why I wanted to bring this digital money into the stage, because this is totally disruptive. It's going to really bring the new generation of internet. It's totally going to really embrace this in many different forms. So I'll leave it up to you. So I don't want to take the stage. So that's what I have.
That's actually an excellent point as far as how much did this cost to transact?
How much did that cost to transact?
How much did it cost within Ripple to do that transaction?
Sure. So it's going to clear at the market rate of whatever the closest bid ask is for gold and USD.
So there's no transaction fee between.
Right. Okay. So maybe we can talk about the role of the gateway. So a gateway is like a trusted friend, okay, that takes responsibility for holding that store of value. So Ripple Singapore acts as that trusted friend, and we charge 0.2% for that transaction to cover our costs.
Okay. So with Bitcoin, we don't actually trust anybody.
Right.
Right, a little bit different. And the transaction that I sent to her cost about 5 cents. And that could have been for 10 cents a transaction or $1 million a transaction. And it could have been from me to her here, or it could have been from me to her on the other side of the world instantly, just as it would have been with Ripple as well. So you talk about savings of wire transfers alone. I know recently Singapore gave $7 million to the victims in the Philippines as a donation for the hurricane relief. And it's great, $7 million, fantastic. But easily $7 million a month is lost in remittance fees between Singapore and the Philippines. So if you could eliminate that, then you don't need all these additional charity, you know, being given by governments to governments or governments to people. And it goes directly to the people who need it too. If a maid is sending back money to her family, there's no intermediary to take a percentage of that. So,
yeah, absolutely. I can't see, to be honest, people tolerating these 2 to 3 working days plus $20 fee for very much longer. I don't see that being on the cards with the technology that's available. It's kind of unacceptable. But this could also apply to shares and crowdfunding and crowdsourcing. So What's needed for crowdsourcing to work out on Ripple is trusted gateways. So I spoke to Alexis a few days ago about the fact that the companies that he's helping float on the, is it Panama Stock Exchange?
Panama Bitcoin Security Exchange.
Okay, thank you. Could also be done on Ripple. And obviously, right now, that doesn't make any commercial sense because Alexis already has to convince people of what Bitcoin is, let alone it's being floated on Ripple, which is just going to confuse people further. So I think stage one for Ripple is all the different currencies of the world being on the network, a few banks using it as their internal clearinghouse, before things further up the liquidity pyramid can be traded, such as shares. But it's certainly, it's technologically possible right now. I don't think it's going to be commercially viable for a year or two.
In a normal monetary economy, it's the governments that decides if they want to put out more money in the system with the risk of inflation and so on. Who decides how many bitcoins is out there? And in the future, if this is getting more and more popular, as we all think,
Right.
what will you do? What will the Bitcoin government do? I mean, like, it has big implications of the whole system.
Well,
I just don't understand it at all. So explain it to me. Who decides, and what is the possible implications?
when Satoshi Nakamoto created the Bitcoin protocol, he
Who is
said
Satoshi,
that.
by the way?
We don't know. So as I showed you earlier, all these people got arrested or other things happened. Satoshi was very smart in that he after a couple of years he walked away from it and he gave it to the community.
Can he be a robot? Protocol. Can he be a robot?
I don't know if there's any quite that smart yet. But
Okay.
So he defined it as a 21 million cap that would be released over a period of time. And it's a reward to the miners for validating those transactions. So when I sent her the Bitcoin, behind the scenes are the miners validating that transaction. The first one to validate that gets a little bit of Bitcoin. And so it's slowly released over a period. I think the final one will be 2140 is when it'll be complete at 21 million. Right now we're at about 12.5 million. So it's a very slow inflation rate. And it's actually deflationary more by nature because there's always going to be more demand than is actually being generated. I think about 3,600 a day are generated. And yeah, and then there's 8 decimal places. So there's plenty of Bitcoin available. It's just that it gets more valuable as you go out.
And it becomes more valuable when people lose them.
Yeah, so some people forget their private key, and that increases the value of everyone else's. And sometimes they're destroyed by mistakes and things like that. So yeah, it's set by math. Cool. So I think basically the believers in Bitcoin, we tend to follow algorithms and math and science rather than unelected officials in foreign countries.
Thank you, Epi. Here's a hard one. How to influence skeptical and fearful financial institutions and governments to embrace the positive sides of alternative currencies, for example, eliminate the wastage that David just mentioned. Thank you.
Okay, our job is not to influence them. It's actually, it's your job. Once these institutions will see that there's so much acceptance, they cannot ignore it anymore. They won't have any other choice. As much as it's extremely difficult to forbid that I'll send you a super piece of music. We can't suppress this freedom that now we take for granted, that it's this beautiful gift that we got called internet. I can pass to you some music and it's a peer-to-peer transaction. Although, you know, there's laws and, you know, there's iTunes and but nobody can forbid this. So now the music industry is embracing that slowly. Financial institutions will embrace this as well, and they cannot turn a blind eye onto it, because apparently, and it looks like it, if it's not Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies are here to stay, because we need it. And as you pointed out, and many people pointed out, I mean, who will accept to be charged that much money and wait for so many days for a transaction to go through? Well, we can't do that anymore, can we? So I believe the financial institutions are going to, they're going to embrace it, that's for sure.
Great. Great. Well, thank you. You can catch up with the guys later. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Alexis,
giving us.
thank you.
Much.
This is
Pleasure.
really great.
A delight.
Awesome.